Welcome to Week 15, everyone. Well, we've finally made it. We have reached the summit of your master's program in NGO management. Today, we're going to synthesize everything you've learned this entire semester into our final integrated capstone explainer. We're going to look at the very real, often messy realities of running a non-governmental organization from the very top.
So, the big question is, are you ready to lead? Your challenge as future executives is making that absolutely critical transition from theoretical learners to executive-level decision-makers. You aren't just studying NGOs from a textbook anymore. You are stepping up to diagnose organizational health, navigate intense, real-world crises, and steer highly complex institutions toward their missions.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be covering 15.1, Integrating Core NGO Functions, 15.2, Organizational Diagnosis, 15.3, Strategic Options and Trade-offs, 15.4, Mission Drift and Legitimacy, 15.5, Crafting Executive Recommendations, and finally, 15.6, Synthesis and Reflection. Let's dive in.
Starting off with Section 15.1, Integrating Core NGO Functions.
Here, we really have to take a holistic view of the organization's many moving parts. As an executive, you literally can no longer afford to look at departments in isolation. Effective NGO management requires harmonizing 7 core functions. Think of things like governance and strategic planning, all the way over to human resources, program development, and financial management. These are like distinct threads of a single tapestry. You have to weave these areas together. If your human resources department is totally disconnected from your financial management, or if your stakeholder management completely ignores program development, the entire organization is going to quickly fall out of rhythm.
Moving right along to Section 15.2, Organizational Diagnosis. So, what happens when that rhythm breaks down? We have to know how to diagnose an organization when its integrated functions begin to fail. Tichy's network model is a fantastic diagnostic framework for this because it separates the organization into technical, political, and cultural dynamics. If your NGO is failing to meet its goals, you have to ask yourself, is it a technical problem with resources? Is it a political issue regarding dominant stakeholder groups and power struggles? Or is it maybe a cultural clash where the organization's deep-rooted values just don't match the intended change? You have to pinpoint the exact nature of the dysfunction.
To actually perform a proper needs assessment, you must evaluate these specific internal targets. What you're looking for here are the gaps between your current reality and your desired future state. Assessing mission clarity, intensely scrutinizing the budget, and evaluating the actual skills of both paid staff and volunteers, which, let's be honest, doesn't always match what's written on paper. Doing this gives you the hard, undeniable data you'll need to justify necessary changes to your stakeholders.
Which brings us to Section 15.3, Strategic Options and Trade-offs.
Once you have a clear diagnosis, you've got to navigate the complex choices required to actually fix the organization. Welcome to where the theoretical meets the practical. The most crucial point here is managing this constant, ongoing tension, sticking strictly to the original intent of the mission versus adapting your strategy to secure funding so you can survive. In the literature, this is explicitly defined as the tension of practicality. You will constantly be weighing whether a strategic choice, one that might secure immediate financial sustainability, is actually consistent with the core values of your nonprofit.
As an executive, you are going to face these severe dilemmas, where literally every strategic choice involves compromising one priority to satisfy another. Do you focus on alleviating immediate symptoms, or do you dedicate your scarce resources to long-term structural policy change? Do you maintain total independence, or do you partner with the government for greater leverage? And what about honoring a founder's intent versus adapting to entirely new realities? There are no easy answers here, only tough trade-offs.
Next up is Section 15.4, Mission Drift and Legitimacy. When those strategic trade-offs we just talked about go too far, they can compromise the very reason your NGO exists in the first place. Look at how NGOs evolve over time. You might start with a local grassroots community meeting, and eventually scale up to something like the towering BRAC corporate headquarters in Bangladesh. Scaling up completely alters how an institution maintains its legitimacy with the public. As organizations grow, they often shift from face-to-face, associational styles to highly formalized bureaucracies. And that kind of growth? It can easily invite mission drift.
Now, interestingly, sometimes an NGO actually achieves its goal, which sounds great, right? But this can trigger what we call mission wobble. A famous example is the discovery of the polio vaccine in the 1950s. The National Foundation for Infant Paralysis had achieved its primary objective, so did they just pack up and shut their doors? Absolutely not.
They brilliantly pivoted, rebranded, and became the March of Dimes. Reinvention is sometimes absolutely necessary for survival. However, shifting missions can create intense internal turmoil. Take war zones like Ukraine, for instance. Early efforts that focused purely on military supplies can quickly blur into providing civilian aid, which stretches resources dangerously thin. Or look at Haiti, where celebrity influence like Sean Penn using his star power and personal network to rewrite the humanitarian playbook can bring in massive funding, but it also completely alters traditional NGO operational norms. You also have to be on high alert for mission creep driven by demanding donors or inflexible founders whose strict control ends up damaging the organization's reputation over time.
To combat this mission drift and maintain trust, you must anchor your organization in Bodansky's sources of legitimacy. You have to continually prove to your stakeholders that you have the right to operate based on your historical origins, your transparent and democratic procedures, and ultimately your successful outcomes. Guys, good intentions are simply no longer enough. You have to prove your effectiveness.
Let's move to Section 15.5, Crafting Executive Recommendations. Armed with all this theoretical and practical knowledge, we have to format it into actionable advice. As you step into executive roles, you'll structure your recommendations by systematically following these 3 steps. You always start with a thorough internal scan. Follow that up by rigorously reviewing the mission's current relevance, and only then do you recommend specific, targeted strategic actions.
And remember, your recommendation must perfectly respect the boundary between governance and management. The board of directors governs the mission, sets policy, and provides strategic oversight. On the flip side, the chief executive officer manages the day-to-day operations, spans the boundaries between the NGO and the external world, and executes the strategy. Blurring these lines? Well, that's a one-way ticket to micromanagement and dysfunction.
And finally, Section 15.6, Synthesis and Reflection. As we bring this capstone explainer to a close, let's zoom back out to the daily realities of leadership. You will always be managing what's called the NGO dual management dynamic. This is the constant friction and negotiation between a highly professionalized executive staff on one side and a passionate, volunteer governance board on the other. Navigating this push and pull gracefully is the true hallmark of a great executive.
Ultimately, as the quote here reminds us, your success hinges on conflict resolution. Conflict is absolutely inevitable, but it doesn't have to be destructive. Your job is to create safe environments where trust, transparent communication, and fair decision-making prevail. By addressing challenges head-on, you pave the way for true mission impact. As you graduate and step into your roles as NGO executives, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. In a landscape defined by complex trade-offs, shifting global crises, and rigorous demands for accountability, how will you ensure your leadership bridges the gap between visionary ideals and practical, sustainable impact? Thank you all for an incredible semester, and I truly can't wait to see the impact you're going to make out there.